I'm Nicola Hume and welcome back to a very, very special edition of Talking Ball. Now, we are currently recording this from the Goodwood Festival of Speed. We are celebrating 20 years of Red Bull Racing taking part in Formula One. A big, big celebration. And if you've never been at Goodwood Festival of Speed, or if you don't know what it's about, it's a bit like the motorsport version of Glastonbury. There are major headline acts. There are cars being revealed left, right and centre, including the RB17, which was revealed yesterday, and it's a thing of beauty. And then you've also got the red arrows flying overhead. So essentially, if this was the motorsport Glastonbury, there would only be one person that can take the legend spot. Now, this man joined Red Bull back in 2005. He was the first person ever to get Red Bull on the podium in 2006. 62 podiums in the last, over 14 years of being in Formula One. And he is sat with me right now, and I can't quite believe it. David Coulthard, thank you so much for joining me on Talking Ball.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I have noticed that you've sat as far away as you possibly can from me. Is that for acoustic reasons, or are you?
It's mostly for cameras.
Are you okay?
We've got like 3 cameras set up, so if you are watching this via YouTube, you'll see what we mean.
You've got a bunch of security staring me down as well.
Yeah, we do have that as well. Yeah, but how are you finding Festival of Speed? Because at the moment, I mean, you are a brand ambassador for Red Bull, so you go and do all the show cars, and you do the big events. You travel the world spreading Formula One love
and joy and happiness. Absolutely. To do it here at Goodwood is fantastic. I came to the very first Goodwood event 30 years ago, I think it was now.
Was it really?
And it's grown from what was a small collection of people on the front lawn to this festival that you talk about, and off the back of the British Grand Prix a week ago, which also is like a sort of Glastonbury meets Formula One. Yeah. This sort of takes it to this Glastonbury meets anything to do with automotive, whether it be 2-wheel, 4-wheel. I don't think they've got anything 6-wheel here, although I haven't
spotted any, actually.
And there probably is something, someone on a unicycle.
Yeah.
There'll be some nutter.
Yeah, there's always a nutter somewhere.
Motorised unicycle. Probably, with a Red Bull hat on.
Yeah, but you've already been up the hill already today, haven't you?
I went all the way up. I came all the way down.
Very good.
And later, I'll go all the way up. I'll come all the way down.
Are you doing it all in the same car?
Yes, RB8 is what I drove yesterday and today, and I think I'm in RB9 tomorrow.
Okay.
So a journey into the unknown. I'll be losing my RB9 virginity tomorrow, which is kind of fun.
How are you enjoying our Airstream caravan?
Well, I've never been in an Airstream. And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It always looks, I'm like, why do they curve it in so much? But I guess you don't really hang around the edges, do you?
Yeah.
So why make it bigger than it needs to be?
Yeah.
It's intimate.
It is intimate. And actually, if you are listening to this, you're probably going to hear a lot of revving and a lot of popping going on in the background, because I know that you are about to go up the hill again straight after we record this. So if I've got this right, I think they are actually revving up one of your engines in a bit.
I think that sounds like it might be the Drift Brothers more than the V8. Yeah.
Can you tell by the sound?
Oh, yes. It's a throatier.
Yeah.
It sounds, you can hear there's turbo there as well, whistling in the background.
Yeah.
And the V8 I'm driving doesn't have a turbo.
And the bangs just kind of go through your soul. It's
all
beautiful.
That bang is basically fuel being burned in the exhaust, which is quite inefficient. In Formula One, there isn't really much banging in the exhaust at all now, because they're so efficient in the way they do the programming. All the fuel gets spent in the cylinder rather than dripping out into the exhaust.
Obviously being a driver within Formula One, but now you work with Channel 4, bit of commentary, punditry, that sort of thing. Do you think it was kind of always in you? So as soon as you stopped racing, you were like, I know exactly where I need to go.
Yeah,
because not everyone can do that.
Well, some would argue I can't either, but
yes, you can.
Every broadcast and spreading for diversity and inclusion, you've got to have a Scotsman in there somewhere.
Naturally.
Or Scotswoman, of course. So I was 14 years old, sitting on the sofa in the optimistically named Sun Lounge in our house in Scotland.
Yeah.
We're optimists up there.
No, good for you,
so my
for
mother,
your one day of sunshine a year.
One day of sunshine. So my mother would be in the main living room watching an omnibus of EastEnders or something.
Yeah.
And my father and I would watch the Grand Prix, and he said, when you get to Formula One, you should consider living in Monaco because of logistics, security, training, all that. And he also said, which is the link to the question you just asked me, because I think you were probably just of the mind thinking, I asked him about...
No, I know you're going somewhere.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So the link is, he also said, listen to James Hunt. He was working alongside Murray Walker and had become a broadcaster, and he said, if you're lucky, you'll have a 10-year career as a driver, then you should work in television. So when I did my last year with Red Bull in 2008, I'd already signed to the BBC, and I left the paddock 2008 November as a Grand Prix driver, and 2009 March, I'm standing with a microphone going 3, 2, 1. I kind of just do what I think I would like to hear if I was a young guy sitting back in Scotland. I'd like to know behind the scenes. I'd like to know what the drivers are thinking. I'm not really a techie guy. I love the fact that I worked with engineers, people like Adrian that had, could see air. I can breathe it, but I can't see it. Yeah. And other great, designers who you can have a conversation and say, could we do this? And you don't really know what this is because it hasn't been invented. And they go away, and then maybe a day later, a week later, a month later, come back and say, I've got this idea. Would you be able to use that as a driver? And you go, Eureka.
Yeah.
That's exactly the thing that I didn't know what it would be or what it's called, but that's the thing that's going to make the job a lot easier or the car go faster. So I loved working with engineers, but essentially I'm just a fan who happened to drive a race car.
That's amazing. I love it. You're basically living your best life.
Of all the lives I've lived, this one is awesome.
Of all of the many lives, here you are, sat in a caravan.
What can I say? It's actually, it's quite pleasant.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. We've got a load of questions that have come in from listeners, by the way. So on the Red Bull Racing site, there's the paddock, which is like the fan forum. So everyone has been sending in questions. We've had thousands of questions.
Awesome.
We're going to go through every single one of them. 1,000 questions. Here we go. This first one is from Gil from Belgium, who says, how has your experience as a driver influenced your approach to commentary?
I like to keep it simple as a driver. So I like to keep the commentary simple. We can all baffle people with BS by, talking about it in a way as if it's something that mere mortals can't do, but ultimately it's just a car. It's a very fast car.
A very fast car.
And the most talented people in the world, your Maxes, and pick any driver from the history of time that was a multiple world champion, they are able to operate at a level and consistency that the other good drivers don't manage to achieve. But ultimately, there'll be something Max does, maybe throwing a ball or kicking a ball, where he looks like he's, not very coordinated.
Yeah.
He won't
Let's hold on to that audio and play that for Max at some point.
Yeah, exactly. But there'll be something he's not particularly good at.
Yeah.
He just happens to be an exceptional Grand Prix driver.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess you end up watching it, but you understand what it's like to be sat in that seat.
Absolutely.
You have a whole different perspective that other commentators don't have.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you've got enthusiasm and you're able to portray that to the audience and make them feel as if they're part of the journey rather than excluded, and I think that's why there's a lot of great men and women that are involved in Formula One who've never driven a go-kart, never mind a Grand Prix car, but it doesn't get in the way of the fact that they're just engaging and you feel part of their journey and they take you on that journey. What I can do is say what it feels like to arrive over the hill into Casino Square at 180 miles an hour. I know what it feels like to win in Monaco or other venues. I also know what it feels like to embarrass yourself by spinning out on the way to the grid or crashing in the pit wall, all of the good stuff that happened during my career. But in the end, sport is I think sport's brilliant generally because it brings people together, young and old. We can all find something within the sport that attracts us. I was talking to some of the marshals here. God, can you imagine their commitment to come here, give up their time, to be part of that process, to make sure everything runs safely? But that's their calling. That's the thing that they love to do. And, we have to be incredibly thankful and appreciative of that. And there's many other areas in motorsport. And I think as a sport generally, Formula One, it offers something for everyone that wants to operate at a high level, whether that's in the media side, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in catering, whether it's in design, whether it's in research, whether it's in IT, whether it's in, you name it. This sport covers everything. Many people would love to be part of it, but only the very best in all of their categories sustain, because you've got to have the work ethic. This isn't 9 to 5. This is a passion business, as all sports are. You don't go, a football match, oh, hold on, come on, it's after 8 p.m. I've put in a shift now.
Guys, come on now.
Yeah,
it's bedtime. This is overtime now.
Absolutely. you work with your team to achieve your goals as a team, and that's a wonderfully addictive place to be part of.
Cracking answer.
Yeah.
This is from Marnik in the Netherlands, who says, whose style of commentating do you really like? And is there any commentator you looked up to? You've already kind of touched on this.
Well, Murray Walker is who I grew up listening to. Murray and James Hunt. They were the voices that took me on this journey from a small village in Scotland around the world, and I had no reason to doubt them. They sounded very plausible and trustworthy. And James had won a world championship and was a flamboyant character, and Murray was an absolute professional with a voice that was instantly recognisable and incredibly enthusiastic. I'm sure if he was doing commentary on an egg boiling, it would just be the best egg boil in the world. So that to me was the ultimate pairing. I think my ex-manager, Martin Brundle, who had been a Grand Prix driver, so he'd been a competitor, then he was my manager. And then I worked with him at BBC, and we ended up working together in the commentary box. And we won an award together for the two, I think it was 2009 or 2010. Maybe it was 11. Whenever Jensen won in the McLaren in Canada, the race, it was 4 hours long, and we had to just keep talking because it was live TV.
Yeah.
And somehow we managed to entertain ourselves and others during that process. So Martin is, an incredible professional in that field, and he often says, which is slightly self-depreciating, but he goes that he feels his Grand Prix career was the sort of foundations of his commentary career.
Yeah.
Of course, it was the knowledge.
Yeah.
But that's kind of saying as if, I'm a world champion in this and I wasn't in cars. The reality was he was a world champion in sports cars, a podium finisher in Formula One, and he just happens to be a really, really good commentator and presenter as well. Oh,
I've got to ask this, actually. It's just popped into my head. Because you were kind of listening to commentary and stuff when you were younger, before you even ended up in Formula One, while you were driving, were you kind of commentating your own moves in your head while you were driving?
No.
And I'd be like, and there goes David Coulthard!
No.
Do you see on the inside?
No, I was very sort of closed mouth. Like I was trying to say teeth. And
closed teeth.
I put a T on outh instead of M for mouth.
Closed mouth.
Tooth, yeah. That's what I ended up saying. But I was a very closed mouth driver, and just sort of very focused on what was going on. So I was never a kind of smack the steering wheel overlay. I think I was reasonably good at channeling my thoughts in a calm way rather than doing a commentary.
This is from Jennifer in Sweden, who says, which race has been the most chaotic, in the sense that the most has changed during the final laps? So then as soon as you leave the commentary box and then you've got to go down to do the post-race interviews, have you ever gone, what did I miss?
Yeah, on several occasions that's happened, because most cases the commentary box is outside of the circuit, so you have to then either go over a bridge or, worst case, under a tunnel.
Yeah.
So if we look at the most recent one in Austria, I left the commentary box and Max was leading. By the time I got to the actual place where you get ready to do the interviews in the Parc Fermé, George Russell is leading the race.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's happened?
Yeah.
So people are all busy there. And so I'm trying to ask a scrutineer, I'm trying to ask someone, what the hell's happened?
Yeah.
And then they go, there was some contact, and both, Max and Lando are out. So in those situations, that's not ideal.
Yeah.
But it just kind of goes with the territory that occasionally the guy that's leading when you leave the comm box is no longer leading by the time you get to the top three interview position.
That's chaos.
Yeah.
Yes. This is from Dolce in the USA, who says, we saw you give a great show in Chicago last year. Do you prefer driving on permanent circuits or street circuits?
I took every challenge as it came.
Yeah.
I was always reasonably good, I think, as a driver, which sounds, it sounds arrogant to say, but
be arrogant. You're allowed.
But I won in Macau, which was a really ultimate street circuit coming up through the lower formulas, Formula 3, a track that the late great Ayrton Senna hailed as one of the greatest tracks. So who's going to argue with that?
Yeah.
I was podiums in Pau in Formula 3000, did a few podiums in Monaco. So I think street circuits is all about understanding the width of your car, quite obviously, and the limit. The limit is defined by a barrier. On wider tracks, it's actually a little bit more tricky, because you can run to the white line. Some places you can run on a curb, some places it might be grass. It's a bit, there's a lot more going on around a 5-6 mile racetrack.
Yeah.
So look, I won on both types of tracks, but I think that some guys like Jacques Villeneuve, who was a world champion, wasn't, in my opinion, particularly good on street circuits, but he was a Grand Prix winner and a world champion on the others.
This is from Marie in the UK. Having driven both the RB1 and the RB19, do you think you would have preferred to have been an active F1 driver now or when you were driving?
Definitely happy with the era that I raced in terms of the cars. When I talked to some of the drivers, and I won't mention their names, but some of which I had raced against as well, then they admire the technology. Formula One is Formula One, but they're managers more today. They're managing battery, they're managing tyres, they're managing a lot of different things in the cockpit, where the generation before, you got what you've got and you go racing. We refuel, so the cars were lighter during the race, so you didn't have this big variation in lap time. Tyres were less thermal inefficient, so you don't really hear the drivers talking about peak temperatures. We just drove to the grip we had. So there was a simplicity which gave you that sort of raw racing.
But in terms of just driving, like when you go and do a show with Red Bull, would you rather do it now in an RB1 or an RB19?
RB1. RB19's too big, too heavy, too complicated, not noisy enough. It's a sort of monster truck in comparison to RB1. So RB1 is little exercise.
Just a little.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. That was a good impression.
That was pretty impressive. Well, I think we've had a little insight to your high-pitched voice of excitement there. It's like.
This is from Eddie in Canada, who says, what were your pre-race routines before stepping into a car during a race weekend?
Just methodical, my preparation in terms of, I'd like to be back in my little driver room, sort of 45 before, so I could gather my thoughts, have a nap if that's what I felt like.
Oh, okay, little power nap.
Or just chill, get ready, stretch, get to the garage at the same time. Get in the car at the same. Just routine, I think, is really important, because then if there is an issue, you are already, let's say, prepared in many ways. And then, of course, you get to the grid, get out, do some interviews, get back in, and then that wonderful moment when the mechanics walk away from the car, and you're left with the baton of responsibility. The team have done everything they can for you up until that point. You then have the responsibility for a few hundred people. Or a couple of thousand now if you involve powertrains, and then you go about the race, and then the team come into play again, obviously with strategy and pit stops. But it's that wonderful sort of transition of you're in control, I'm in control, you're in control, and I think that is the power of team. It's about people accepting that at various moments you're either the lead or you're the support, and no one's offended by that. If somebody is only comfortable being lead all the time, then I think it'd be very difficult to fit in a team.
This is from Craig in the UK. What would you consider your hardest earned race victory?
I think Magny Cours 2000, when I was at McLaren at that time, and we go out to qualify. I have a technical problem with my car, come in, get in the T car, go out to qualify, have a problem with that car. In the meantime, Mika, my teammates, had a problem with his car. They fix my car, so he's got into my car, so I come in, have to get into his car. I then go out and qualify in his car, second to Michael, and I think Mika was fourth in my car. So it was quite satisfying to out-qualify my teammate in his car, taking away any thought that his car might be better. And then the race start, Michael cut across me and I had to lift. That allowed Rubens to overtake me. I then had to fight to overtake Rubens, and then I had to catch Michael and fight to overtake him, give him the bird, tell him he's a wanker, and then continue on and win the Grand Prix. So I think that was probably one of the most challenging weekends.
You were at that?
I did, so that was a great feeling.
This weekend we are celebrating 20 years of Red Bull being part of Formula One, and you were there right from the beginning. I want to take you back to when you first started karting at the age of 11, I think that's right, which would have been quite rare for someone from a tiny little village in Scotland. So how did that come about?
It would be quite rare, and when I think about it, 1982, Red Bull didn't exist. So all of what we're celebrating now, it was like you didn't exist back in 1982.
No, I didn't.
There you go.
Well done for assuming that.
So again, now here we are celebrating something that back when I started karting, we could never have known the journey would lead to this point where we're in this, whatever you call it again,
Airstream.
Airstream. But the reason I got into karting is my father was actually Scottish karting champion when he was 14. And
it was in you then.
Well, it was, but sadly his father died that same year.
Right.
And so his mother didn't like racing. Right. Stopped him racing, sent him off to boarding school. And he never got to continue, but he had the passion and the bug, which is why when he met my mother, and they're both still happily married today, breaking the trend of people normally, most marriages end in divorce, but they've hung in there, they've delivered.
Go on, Mum and Dad.
Yeah, absolutely. So they created the opportunity for my brother, myself, and my sister. I was the one that kind of, showed the work ethic to stick with it, and it led to eventually being a Grand Prix driver, which I think is pretty impressive.
And what's your biggest memory of Monaco 2006? Apart from the Superman cape.
Apart from the Superman cape, yeah. I remember, of course, it was like many of these Grand Prix, there was a lot happening during the race, and you never really know where you're going to finish until you finish. That era of Formula 1 was a little bit less reliable. But I just remember the very first Grand Prix I did in 2005 and finished fourth. I remember Christian hugging me in a way I'd never been hugged by a man before. He was so... it represented such a big moment for the team, because actually in finishing fourth, we'd already outscored what the former Jaguar team had been in that one race. So it set the sort of, the sails, and the trajectory in a brilliant way. So if you then move forward to the point where we get the first podium, the hug was still pretty tight, and the celebration was typical Red Bull style, and not many people. I asked Prince Albert if I could wear the cape on the podium, which he was, of course, absolutely fine with that, despite the fact that some of the media said you look ridiculous and I was like, I don't care. I look ridiculous. I'm on the podium for the team. Christian then wrapped himself in that to jump in the pool. There was just a lot of emotions, because when you're the teams that are working their way towards the front or aspiring to be at the front are working just as hard as the teams that are at the front, but the rewards aren't there. That feeling of failure is something you stare down as you're trying to find the right direction and you're trying to put together the team. So when you get those little moments of success, they've got to be celebrated. They're landmark moments in the building point to where Red Bull ultimately have been one of the dominant teams against manufacturer teams. An energy drinks company is beating Ferrari and Mercedes and Alpine, and does it in a way with, I think, a great deal of respect, because they recognise that the challenge is incredibly difficult. And those teams that I just mentioned, these are teams that have been part of the sport. In the case of Ferrari, since the foundations of the sport, you've got to recognise the importance of going up against a team like that, and ultimately, if you're lucky enough to beat them, that's something to be celebrated.
Yeah. This is my final question, because I know you've got to shoot off and then jump in a car and drive up the hill here at Goodwood. But obviously being part of this team has meant a lot to you, for you to then become brand ambassador, to work with the charity Wings for Life, that sort of thing. Is it purely because you love the team so much, or is it just as well because you love the buzz of doing some hot laps? Like, what is it that keeps you holding on and keeps you part of the Red Bull family?
I was so part of those early building years. I was more integrated in the way I worked with Christian and Adrian and the others, senior leadership, than I'd ever been with any other team. I've got great memories of my time at Williams. I was at an event with Claire Williams recently, and she was a little girl when I joined the team as a test driver, and then she rose up to being the team principal. McLaren, I was there for a memorial for an ex-teammate of mine, Gilles de Ferran, the other week, and a lot of people there that I worked with and spent 9 seasons with. So I've been very lucky to have built these relationships with teams. But of course, logically, Red Bull being the one where I was more than just a driver, if I can put it like that. I was, spending time with Christian in Austria, with Dietrich, going through what we felt we needed to bring in, what we felt we needed to enhance. And it was a wonderful period where I could use my experience and knowledge of the sport to try and affect change. And it was one based on belief. I absolutely believed that it's all about the people. It's not the name above the door. So if it was the name above the door, Ferrari would win everything, because they are the longest serving, most iconic name in automotive. But Red Bull have achieved success by the vision of Dietrich in empowering people to do their jobs. he doesn't try and do the job for them. If they're not delivering and doing the job, then of course he then will expect that person to step aside.
Well, like we were saying earlier, you need to be the best of the best to be able to be working in Formula 1.
There you go. So, and that's why to still be involved with the journey from, let's say, an observing point of view, I'm not involved in any of the internal part of the team, it gives me a sense of pride. And I've observed the good moments, the bad moments, the embarrassing moments, but I think it's important to be able to look at the picture as a whole. And also, however good the times are, there will be difficult times ahead. However difficult the times are, there'll be good times ahead. It's about, I think, sometimes just being able to step back and see the bigger picture. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Talking Ball episode. We know that you've now got to go jump in. What was it, the RB8 you're jumping in?
RB8, yes.
Yeah, and then go and drive it up the hill. Go and do what you've got to do.
Why don't you do it?
Shall I
think,
yeah, right.
Go and put the kit on. Yeah. Come out of there with the helmet on. Tuck your hair in, because we've got a hair colour, length and colour difference.
I'll be all right.
And you go and do it. And who's your next guest? I'll talk.
Well, actually, this afternoon we're chatting to Adrian Newey. So.
Well, I've known Adrian since I was 22. So why don't I do Adrian? You go and do the hill.
Sounds good.
Deal.
Shake on it. Thank you so much, DC. Thank you. Oh, by the way, David didn't do the interview. He actually did the driving. I did the interview with Adrian Newey, so you can watch that now. It's on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe to Talking Ball, because we have so much more for you coming up for the rest of the season. It's going to be brilliant. See you soon.